Hello, this is the third lecture in a series of 4 on theories, models, and frameworks that are used in health education. So today in this lecture, we're going to talk about 2 different change theories. One is for individuals and one is for organizations. The first one is the stages of change trans-theoretical theory, and it relates to how people change individual behaviors. There are 6 stages of this theory, and individuals typically fall into one of these, and it's important as a health educator or a program planner to understand your population and where they are in the stages so that you know the type of program to create. So in the pre-contemplation phase, people are typically unaware that there's an issue. So someone could be overweight and not aware that it's an issue. Someone could be using drugs and not fully comprehend there's an issue. Someone could be having unsafe sex and not really think it's an issue. So in the pre-contemplation phase, if the majority of your population is here, one of the big issues for you as a program planner is to create a situation where you can move them to the stage to contemplation where they actually can begin to realize there's an issue. So for contemplation, this is where people realize there's an issue. So for example, someone's overweight and they're like, oh, this is a health issue. I should probably lose weight. Unsafe sex, I should probably use condoms, or any other health behavior. So these are issues where the person starts in their brain to first begin to realize, yes, this is a problem. In the preparation phase, people actually start to prepare to participate in some type of programming. So someone who is not using condoms in the preparation phase may begin to identify where condoms can be purchased, or they may begin to purchase condoms. In someone who's losing weight, they may begin to review online different weight loss programs. Someone who is using drugs may begin to look at different ways that they could possibly stop using drugs. So in the preparation phase, when people are actually preparing, they're very close to being ready to act. If your population is in the preparation phase, that program is going to look very different than if your population is in the pre-contemplation or contemplation phase. The next phase is action, and this is where your population is ready to do something. They're ready to use condoms. They're ready to wear seatbelts every day they drive. They're ready to lose weight. They're ready to take an action that's actually going to change whatever it is they're focused on. In maintenance, this usually lasts about 5 years, and this requires people to really focus on the behavior. So once someone gets to 5 years, the chance of them stopping the health behavior is much lower, and that's why there's a 5-year point. Some people believe up to 7 years is really best, but in the maintenance phase, they typically still need support, whether it's from a program or peers or a computer program. They still need some type of support to help them maintain their healthy behavior. In the termination phase, this is where someone no longer needs the programming in order to continue the health behavior. So I'm going to talk about a specific behavior, and this is weight. And I'm going to use myself as an example because several years ago when my thyroid got messed up and I gained over 100 pounds in a year. And finally I convinced my doctor that something was wrong. Like, okay, this is just ridiculous. So I'm going to walk you through the stages so that you can see them. So I was never in the pre-contemplation phase. I always knew it was an issue. I just couldn't get anybody to act on it for me. So in the pre-contemplation phase, a normal person would just be like, yeah, whatever, I'm overweight, it's no big deal. But for me, I always knew it was an issue. So I started in the contemplation phase. And in the contemplation phase, I was like, I need to lose weight, I need to lose weight, I need to lose weight, I should do something about this. But after gaining 100 pounds in a year, it was very difficult to get motivated beyond the point of I need to lose weight. In the preparation phase, what I did was First of all, I bought a lot of different exercise programs. I have the 10-minute workout, I have bands, I have weights. Um, I joined an exercise facility, and I also started to look at a variety of different diet programs. So, because of my background, I know what the best way to lose weight is. I know that by increasing exercise and addressing food habits, I knew that I would lose weight. However, it was also a very difficult time financially, so I couldn't just join a program that costs a lot of money. So, I continued to look. I purchased all these different exercise programs, and I kept looking on the internet for something that was reasonable that I could do. So finally, after several years of preparing, I finally found a program online that could help me track what I ate and track my exercise to the point that it calculated when I got to 3,500 calories, I would lose a pound. And I did that for a year and I lost 60 pounds. So that's an example of action. So I'm in the action phase. In the maintenance phase, you have to continue that for 5 years. And anyone who knows about health behaviors, it's very easy to slip back into the old ways. And so maintenance in regards to weight loss and exercise, it's more difficult. It sometimes takes a lifetime that you constantly need that reinforcement. But it's still in a typical behavior. After 5 years, the person is much less likely to revert back to poor behavior. I, however, constantly, in my entire life, has been like this. I need some type of reinforcement, and I know that, and I try to seek that. In the termination phase, I would not need a program anymore. But still, I still track my exercise. I still track my eating. But that's something I will always probably have to do the rest of my life. So that's an example of someone working through the different stages of the stage of change theory. When I was in the contemplation phase, a program to get me to lose weight would have looked very different than I was in the preparation phase, the action phase, or the maintenance phase. So you need to be very clear when you're working with people what phase they're in so that the program that you develop matches where they are so that you can take them to the next step. You cannot take someone in the pre-contemplation stage and put them in a program to get them to action. You have to take them through the steps to get them ready to actually act. So what is this in summary? It identifies how close someone is to making a change so that you can develop a program that matches where your population is. Sometimes a program might have 3 or 4 different pieces to it because your population might be spread over several stages or several phases. So the next model is a theory of organizational change. And in the theory of organizational change, there are 4 main stages that the organization has to go through to implement a change. And after I go through the changes, I'm going to give you a very specific example of how this happens. So in the problem definition stage, this is where you actually have to let the organization see that there's a problem. Because in this beginning stage, an organization may not even think a problem exists. In the initiation phase, this is where you work with your stakeholders within the organization to develop policies and procedures and to start to develop programs that match the needs of the community in the organization. The third step is to implement the program. And it's very important that you have all of those pieces together before you implement. Otherwise, you're increasing your risk for failure. And the last stage is institutionalization. And during the institutionalization phase, this problem and the program that addresses it becomes part of the fabric of the institution. It typically takes 7 years to see an organizational change happen. And if you ever get to see this, it's fascinating. So in one of my prior jobs, I became a director of a group of people who had no leadership for 4 to 5 years. And so I put a plan into place to change the behavior of that group of people. and it is really difficult to continue your plan. 4 or 5 years into this plan, I was barely seeing any changes, but I kept moving ahead. I'm like, okay, small is okay. Around the 6th year, the behavior change started to happen. And it was amazing to watch that unfold. So if you're ever in a situation where you're working with an organization and trying to create a cultural change within the organization, you need to be patient because it does take quite a while to actually see that change occur. So I'm going to give you an example of smoking. So when I began college, people were allowed to smoke in class. And you're all like, oh my God, it's so hard to imagine that was in a lifetime. But that would have been a little more than 40 years ago. Everyone in college, people smoked in college classrooms. It was amazing. People smoked in restaurants. People smoked everywhere. At that point in time, between 2/3 and 3/4 of the population in the United States were smokers. So the vast majority of people smoked. So now we're talking about a huge cultural shift with the Lung Association, the Heart Association, trying to transition people and organizations into a new cultural system where smoking is not going to be acceptable. So around my 2nd year of college, the decision was made that you could smoke in a classroom unless somebody in the class complained about it. And so in reality, most people did not complain because if 3/4 of the population smokes, it's highly unlikely that 1/4 of the population is going to say, excuse me, I don't want anybody smoking in this classroom. So the only time that really took effect was when the professor said, there'll be no smoking in this classroom. So then we progress maybe 4 or 5 more years, and it's to the point where there's no smoking in college buildings. You had to go outside to smoke. So when I was getting my master's degree, I would get a bag of M&Ms, and I'd eat M&Ms, and the smokers would go outside and smoke. But that was our stress management techniques. Taking us all the way to the point to today, where there is no tobacco, no smoking allowed on college campuses at all. And I give you this example because it was a very gradual change over many years. But to take an organization from the state of we have smoking in classrooms to the point where there's nothing on college campuses at all is a huge transition. And to realize that it takes that long is important so that you understand that. Another example that I will not take as long to explain is when I worked in a worksite wellness program to identify that alcohol in the workplace was an issue. We first had to convince the organization that people in the organization had drinking problems. And if a certain percentage of the population has drinking problems, then it makes sense that a certain percentage of your work population has drinking problems. And it took us a couple years to convince the people in charge that this was worthy of us addressing it. And we took the approach that it would, one, make people better workers, and it would save the organization a tremendous amount of money in health insurance. So once we got that to that point, then we started to develop policies. Okay, so what happens if we find someone at work with a drinking problem? What if we find someone at work who has been drinking before they came to work? What were those procedures and policies that we put into place? And the policies that we put into place were if we found out someone had a problem, we would get them into treatment. And as long as they stayed into treatment and it didn't affect their work, then we welcomed them back into the workplace. And typically, when you treat people really well in a work site, their performance increases dramatically. And everyone around them sees that you treat someone humanely, their work effort also goes up. So then we implemented our whole program, and about 5 or 6 years into the program, it just became institutionalized. we didn't have to continually educate people and push the issue. Everyone knew this was the policy, this is how we handled it, and everyone just moved forward with that in the institution. So again, it's really important for you to understand, one, if you're changing policy or culture in any type of organization or a community, you need to identify these stages, you need to work through these stages, and you need to be very patient because it might take 7 to 10 years for the change to occur. So what is this theory in summary? It's a theory that focuses on change within an organization or a culture or a community. It's within a larger group of people. And you use it if the company or organization or community wants to focus on a behavior change, whatever that behavior change is. So that concludes part 3 of our lecture. I hope you enjoyed it, and you'll be able to watch the last part of the lecture in step 4.